Now, Kieran, I'm rather worried about you. You haven't had a haircut in quite a while.
I know, it has been nearly 3 months.
Good heavens.
Yeah, it's getting out of hand, isn't it?
It is rather. While we were just chatting there in the kitchen, I showed you a very small picture I have of a very young Rembrandt, which I picked up in Amsterdam about 30 years ago. It's not a real Rembrandt. I could never afford one of those. It's a very small copy of it. And you look very similar, actually. Quite
Yes.
artistic.
Long mop hair is essentially what you're saying, isn't it? A big mop of hair.
A big mop of auburn hair.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Auburn, I've not heard that in a while. Yeah. He was more clean shaven than me. I need to shave as well. I've not looked after myself this week.
You've not been looking
No,
after
I know.
yourself, Kieran.
I
You
know.
know, you need to look after yourself.
I do.
Well, it reminds me of, I had a haircut once. Not once, I've had many, many haircuts. I was in San Francisco
Uh-huh.
staying with my friend John, and he said, "Oh, you need a haircut. Well, why don't you go to my hairdresser's?" I said, "Okay, and he took me there, and it was this up these stairs, and it was this lady's living room,
Right.
and she kind of was hairdressing as a sideline, I suppose, or she may have been of retirement age. I can't remember now. She was a rather large Puerto Rican lady. And while she was cutting my hair, I couldn't see what she was doing because there was no mirror.
Oh.
And this is quite common in the USA. I've been to a haircut before in San Francisco. Not all
Really?
the barbers actually have a mirror, so you can't see what people are doing. It's very, very disconcerting. Anyway, there I was, and she was cutting my hair, and she made a very good job of it, by the way. But while she was cutting my hair, she was also watching her favourite daytime soap opera. And there was one character she was not very happy with at all. She kept saying, "I no like him, I kill him," with the scissors above my head. I tell you, it was the most frightening haircut I've ever had.
I
But
bet.
it did turn out all right.
Well, that's all that matters, I suppose.
Well, it is. And now, I could have been in a slasher movie for all
You
I
could,
know.
yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Maybe you could have found fame. You could have been a victim, and that you would have been all over the news. Poor Neil Zed.
Exactly. Neil said,
What would the headline
killed by lady hairdresser in San Francisco.
Welcome to Hello Dear, the podcast where age is just a number and opinions come with a touch of laughter. I'm Kieran, the young perspective on the twists and turns of life today.
And I'm Neil, the seasoned voice of yesterday with a flair for drama and a love of life. Together we're here to chat about everything under the sun, from the latest trends to the timeless tales of our own experiences. So grab your favourite beverage, get yourselves comfy, and join us as we explore the complexities of life.
Now, Neil, you finally retired after God knows how many retirement dues. I know I said that in one of our last episodes. How many did you have in the end?
Well, I only had two.
Only 2.
I had a retirement due just after I retired
Yes.
in the school drama studio,
do.
which is where it should be.
I remember it
Because that was my
mostly.
centre, it was the focus of my life at one point.
It was your baby, wasn't it? You opened it.
I did. I opened it. I helped design it, and it was my universe. It was my empire. It was my world. And after that, I kept coming in and out of the school, directing shows, and running the school drama trip to Hungary. And then we had the final trip just before the lockdown in February 2020. Gosh, that's 4 years ago now.
It's crazy.
And I had my final, if you like, retirement due, because the 3 performances were my final performances there,
Yeah.
my final production. So it was like that, really.
I thought you had another one a few years before the...
No, that was my 60th birthday.
Ah, your cabaret.
Yes, I did several cabarets.
Yes, I remember that now. That was a long time ago, wasn't it? Your 60th?
Not that long ago, actually.
Well, anyway, the point I was making was, now you're retired, and you were a teacher, did you always want to be a teacher? Was that the path you laid out for yourself? Was that where you wanted to be? Was that where you wanted to be when you were a child?
If you'd asked me when I was 14, still at school, I would have said, I'll probably be an English teacher because I loved English. I loved novels and poems and plays. I love plays. I love watching plays, especially Shakespeare. But I'd be the English teacher who did the school play.
Okay.
And one of my teachers, a wonderful teacher called Louis Maidens, I still remember him. He was the man who taught English, taught me, and also he did the school play.
Now, drama wasn't a taught subject when you were
No,
at school, was it?
not
The
really.
English
No, it
teachers
wasn't.
sort of
No,
took
no.
control of that, yeah.
It was very much extracurricular activity. But he did a big school production every year. In fact, I think we did two. And he's very encouraging. So that's where I would have been, I think. Now, ideally, my dream would have been to have been an actor.
Did you ever pursue that before teaching?
No,
No.
I wanted to, or be a director, but I don't think I had the confidence really.
Mm.
And to be honest with you, my family, weren't particularly well off or anything. It would have been a struggle. But then, if I'd really wanted to do it, I'd have gone ahead and done it, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, my dream would have been to work with the Royal Shakespeare Company. And in those days, they did a season at Stratford. Then they'd follow it up by bringing the season down to London with extra plays. And I would have loved to have done that, been
Yeah.
in the company. And I'd have been with people like Judi Dench, Patrick Stewart, all of that, So I would have liked to have done that. And in fact, I would have been quite happy being a good character actor rather than a leading man.
Mm.
I'd have
They're
could have
just
made
just as important, those roles.
absolutely. You can't,
Especially in
do
Shakespeare, actually, I'd say.
with any play. You
Yeah.
can't do the play without them. And years later, I met someone called Des Barrett, who was an actor, and he was working with the Royal Shakespeare. In fact, we met on a training course, and he actually came to the school to see our first production of Julius Caesar, which went to Hungary.
Mm.
And we were talking, and he said, "You could do it, Neil. You'd be very good." But I didn't.
Mm.
I stayed as a teacher. In fact, looking back, I took that idea of being the English teacher. I did initially teach English. Who does the school play one further? Because I started a drama department.
You did, didn't you? Yeah, you
I
went.
did myself, and I also, set up eventually the drama studio, and we also took these plays to another country
Yeah.
for a long time. So, if you like, the template of the school production was something that I stretched as far as it could possibly go.
Yeah, you really did.
Yeah. When I look back, I don't know how I did it, but I did.
I think it's great that at 14 you said you wanted to be a teacher, and there you go. You've had a huge, successful career as a teacher.
Yes.
And I think you're lucky almost to know. Oh, did you know at 14 you wanted to be a teacher, and you were going to do everything you could to be a teacher?
I remember there was a careers fair.
Oh yeah, of course, the classic. Yeah.
And it was a bit of an amateurish thing. And there was somebody talking about teaching, and there was also somebody talking about acting in the theatre. He was a local speech and drama teacher called Ken Parkin was his name, I remember. And I did look into careers at the BBC.
Mm.
I actually wrote a play for the BBC in handwritten.
Wow.
It was an adaptation of a novel. I was 14, and I sent it to the BBC, and that's when the BBC had their own drama department then. Now they buy in.
Yeah.
They buy in. They had their own drama department, their own drama studios. And I got a lovely typed letter saying, how wonderful that you've done this. And we normally only accept adaptations from established writers and typewritten. I've still got that somewhere.
Wow. Is it so? It was a no, but a very polite no.
Yes.
Yeah.
My primary school teacher,
Hmm.
when I met up with her later on, I was still at school. She said, I think you'll probably become a BBC drama producer.
I can see you taking that role. Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? She saw something in me.
Yeah.
See, and that's what teaching's all about. It's seeing something in someone and encouraging them.
Mm.
But I went for the safe option. Heaven's sake, there must be so many young people, boys and girls, who want to pursue a career in sport. And they know they're not going to do that. It's their dream, but probably they'll do something else. The same with art, the same with drama. I'd like to be a film star, but I probably won't be.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And it's good to have your dreams anyway, because you never know.
No, and I don't think you should ever give up on them. You know,
Yeah.
it's and especially in the creative world, I think it's very hard to trash in the place.
I am. It's my coaster.
Your coaster, mine stuck as well.
It's fallen on the floor.
Oh dear, shall I get it for you?
No, no, it's just like
Oh no, worry about your back. There we go.
I don't know whether that's a worry or sarcasm, listeners. Can you decide for us? And please do send some feedback.
I think in the creative industries, there's not normally like a set part. Like, you know, if someone said, how do you become an actor? There's about a million different ways. There's ways it's pure luck. It's knowing someone. It's going to drama school. It's, you know, going to university, studying English, studying the history of theatre, and then ending up, you know, there's so many different paths in. It was similar with me with photography. Like, there was no, I remember leaving school being like, I want to be a photographer, but then being like,
Well, let's go back to
Yeah.
you. Never mind smoke screening. What made you want to become a photographer? Did you always want to be a photographer?
no, I don't think so. I think as everyone does in primary school, we all go through about, you know, I want to be a fireman, I want to be a postman, I want to be a policeman.
You a fireman?
I know, I could, you know, no, I'm probably too small.
Well, you could get through those windows.
I could, yeah, I could get through all the crawl spaces, yeah. So I got into photography. I didn't always want to be a photographer. And in fact, it came from another hobby of mine. I wanted to be a stop motion animator for Aardman Animations, who make Wallace and Gromit, Shaun the Sheep. I'd still love to go, I tell you.
Wensleydale Gromit.
Cracking cheese, Gromit. It was a terrible impression. Shaun the Sheep was my favourite. It was
Very
probably-
funny.
Yeah, I
They're
love
all
it.
very funny.
I used to always, me and Mum would always come in. I can't remember what day it was on, but it'd always be on. I think it was like 5:05 on CBBC, and we'd sit and watch it.
I love their Christmas specials as well.
Yeah, they're just fantastic, and how they managed to get so much character out of these models that didn't even speak.
Yeah.
You know, especially like the animals and Gromit, like the amount they got out of Gromit, and still do.
What's interesting about those programs and about the films, of course, they're very old-fashioned, actually.
They are. I mean,
They're almost like, I mean, those of us in my age, we're laughing our heads at it because
Yeah.
they're very old-fashioned.
they
They're
use
very northern as well. They've got, in a sense, they've got a very limited appeal.
well, they're based in Bristol.
Yeah, but the characters seem very northern, like Wensleydale Gromits and all
Yeah,
that
I suppose
business,
I know
you
what you mean. Yeah.
A bit like Last of the Summer Wine, really.
Yeah.
Last of the stop motion animation.
But they use a lot of the classic silent movie techniques, I think,
Yes,
in them,
yeah,
and that's
yeah.
what makes them brilliant because it's pure, like it's so well done. They've got it down to an art form. Like if you had to name one, like the stop motion films that we've seen, Aardman do it like no other
no,
like company. They don't try and be a big blockbuster film. They're still very true to the art. They still use clay. They use other practices now, but it's just
And I'll tell you, the other thing is there's charm. There's a charm about them,
there is, yeah.
which I think Disney have lost now completely. The early Disney animations I grew up with, they were quite charming and warm.
But I remember writing to them and trying to get a tour of the studio. I
really?
was obsessed. I was like, this is what I want to do. I still follow them and I still see the jobs and I go, oh,
Well, you should.
good.
You should.
But anyway, so I was making stop motion animations at home and I had a YouTube channel which was awful. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to buy a camera I was using a webcam at the time. And I thought, I'm going to buy a camera so we can make better quality stop motions. And I bought the camera and I mean, it was on me. I just kind of took it places and I started taking pictures. And then the more pictures I took, the more, photography took over. I mean, stop motion animation is long. It takes time. And, you'll say, I think Aardman do a second a day, roughly. And I think it's 18, I can't remember how many, I think it's about 15 pictures a second. Between 15 and 20 pictures a second make 1 second of film.
Wow.
So you can imagine how long it takes them. But anyway, I guess stop motion was more of a practice, and photography was easy to pick up a camera and take pictures. And I just sort of kept taking pictures and developing, going out with friends, taking pictures of them, getting into portraiture. Instagram was quite a community at the time, so it was really nice to connect with other photographers. Still friends with a good few of them, and good friends with some of them. And it sort of just developed from there. And then think as I got older and through GCSEs and sixth form and having to pick options, I kind of was like, no, this is what I want to do. I remember shooting my first wedding in like year 12 and just sort of picked up, and I had a website. The school wouldn't let me take A-level photography because I was the only one in the year that wanted to do it, which I understand. They'd have to pay. They didn't have a specific photography teacher, so they had to bring someone in. And the popularity of the photography A-level had dwindled over the years. And it just so happened that when I was coming to pick my A-levels, I was the kind of what would have been the last one. I was the only one that wanted to take it. So I had to take art instead, and I hated it.
Oh dear.
Because it was a lot more drawing and painting and all of that faff. And I just wanted to take pictures.
Do you feel that because you couldn't take that course, that it actually made you even more determined?
Yeah, it made me more stubborn. I didn't fall out with my art teacher, but we definitely had disagreements.
Oh, I can imagine.
And
I can imagine you having hissy fits.
yeah,
and
well, it wasn't
slamming the
hissy fit.
door.
It was kind of, it was more just like, I know I want to do photography, and I was promised I'd be able to do photography as part of my art at A-level, which I was and I wasn't, and there was a lot more drawing and painting than I would have liked, and I knew I would have to suck it up a bit. So I didn't get a very good grade in the end at A-level. Yeah, I know what you mean. It did kind of, it made me more stubborn, and it made me kind of go, yeah, this is something I definitely wanted to do, and then it just kind of grew from there, and then from uni it just kind of blossomed.
I mean, there is something you need a goad, and maybe I didn't have that goad to make me become an actor or a director. I don't know.
I think for me, I didn't have another option.
Yeah,
You know how you had teaching as your safe bet, and then acting if it didn't work out.
it was the other way around.
Oh, sorry, as acting,
I would say it would have been the other way round.
as in you pursued acting and then you landed on
Yeah,
teaching.
and I think I would have ended up as a director.
Mm.
Not ended up. I would have probably developed into a director. Well, hello, dears. Neil here, just checking in. How are you doing? If you are enjoying today's episode, why not drop us a quick review on your favourite podcast platform? And don't forget to hit the follow button so you never miss an episode. We love hearing and interacting with you. We are into interaction. Follow us then on social media at Hello Dear Pod for bonus content and send us a message. Finally, if you're one of our listeners on Spotify, you can interact with our Q&As and polls, which you'll find on most episodes. All our links are in the description of this episode. Now, let's get back to it.
I didn't have another, like, it was photography or nothing.
It's important, as you said, photography or nothing.
Mm.
I remember when I was about 30, I was getting a bit fed up. I just started teaching. I went into teaching late, and it wasn't going so well, or I thought it wasn't going so well. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll become an actor instead. Maybe I'll just give it up and do it anyways. And there's a famous actor, Derek Jacobi,
Yes.
who was doing a wonderful season at the Barbican Theatre. He'd come down from Stratford with the RSC, the sort of thing I would have done. I wouldn't have been him, though. He's a wonderful actor. And he was doing this wonderful season right the way through the summer and into the autumn, playing all these wonderful roles like Prospero, Cyrano de Bergerac, Peer Gynt, Benedict in Much Ado About Nothing, which is the best Much Ado I've ever seen. All of that. And I wrote to him at the Barbican Theatre saying, I'm thinking about becoming an actor. Can I have your advice, please? And I got a handwritten reply,
Wow.
which I've still kept.
Yeah.
And he put the date on. And I worked out that he'd written this reply probably in between the matinee and the evening performance of whatever.
Wow.
And it was a lovely reply. And he said to me, and I've said this to every single drama student who's come, I want to be an actor, I want to be famous. Not Tom Holland, he became famous.
He was
But I
famous
didn't
before
teach
you had
him.
a chance to teach him.
Exactly.
No,
You
I wasn't.
cow.
You know, he did it without you. That's all I'm saying.
Well, we'll see how he gets on in Romeo. That's what I'm saying. He said to me, this is the very important advice. He said, if you want to act, think twice. If you have to act, go ahead. which is what you're saying. You had to be a photographer.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I didn't know what I would have
Yeah.
done if I probably would have stayed working
And
the
that's
jobs.
the best advice you can give to anybody, because plenty of people want to be an actor, they want to be an actress, they want perhaps to be a film star. But if you want to do that, you've got to think twice about it. 'Cause if you have to do that, you just got to go ahead and just go for it.
Yeah. But sometimes I think having to do it makes you more successful.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I maybe would have returned to photography, but I could have ended up, doing any kind of job that probably wasn't anything. I genuinely don't know what I would have done had photography not worked out. And it only just recently worked out, really,
Yeah.
as of last year, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the next debate I wanted to have with you, is the whole university debate.
You went to uni at the South Bank.
I did go to university, and I don't regret going to university, but at the same time, I feel like I could have. No, I don't know whether I'd be where I am without it. I don't think the physical degree has pushed my career further, but I think I had a lot to learn from university. And I think the debate for people my age now is that experience worth 50, 60, 70, 80 grand, or is it not? What's your opinion on university? Because you went to just one of those random universities that's just sort of, it wasn't it was just, you went to Oxford, didn't you?
I did. It was a long, long time ago.
Was it different? It must have still had the kind of...
It was very different. I mean, in those days, the sixth form was much smaller. I was in a grammar school, so therefore fewer students were going to university. Some of them went from the sixth form into careers.
Well,
of
most
some kind.
most would have left school at 16, probably.
Yes, my parents thought I would leave at 16 and get a job.
Yeah.
Then they thought I'd leave at 18 and get a job. And then this opportunity came to go to university. They had no idea what Oxford was, really.
Did it still have the kind of... Was Oxford and Cambridge
Oh,
still...
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. But they had no idea about
Yeah.
it. For them, struggling with two very small children, it was Neil's going to university, how we're going to cope with this.
Of course. Well, the costs, was it still... How did that work? Was it still like a
It's
loan?
very
or-
different in those days. You had a grant from your local authority.
Okay.
They paid your fee, and also there was a possibility of a maintenance grant.
So similar... Well, the same principles that we
There
have.
were no student loans. No student loans.
So when you say grant, as in you either got it or you didn't have to pay it back?
Yes.
Right, okay.
So basically, you applied for the grant and it went on your parents' income. And in those days, probably the father's income, because not many women worked.
Yes,
Or they
yeah.
worked part-time, whatever. And my mum couldn't work at that point because she had two very small children as well. So that was the situation. And we received a cheque, which we collected every term and then put it in the bank.
Wow.
That's what we did. Now, in a way, it was very good, but there was this it was a little bit unequal because some local authorities were more generous than others with the grants, but there was that system, and yes, they did pay the fees if the parents couldn't afford to pay for the fees. Obviously, if people were very rich, they didn't apply for a
So it
grant.
was still means tested to an extent.
It was means tested, yes. And I don't think I'd have gone otherwise.
The difference for my generation is most people go to university.
Yeah.
And if you don't go to university, people question it.
Yeah.
Whereas for you, it was the opposite.
Yes.
Whereas going to university was the odd one out or odd thing to do.
Yeah, it's a big deal,
So what
which I didn't realise.
So what made you go to university? Did you know you had to for what you wanted to do, or
It just was the next step. It was like most people of that age. I didn't think very clearly about what I wanted to do. Well, I've told you what I ended up doing. And I thought, I'll have to get a degree to be a teacher,
Yeah.
Then I thought, well, maybe if I go to university, something will develop with the acting.
Yeah, I
know.
get it. You'd meet someone. or-
I'm thinking back now. I was in a youth theatre as well, and that kind of gave me those aspirations. And I did some writing and directing at the youth theatre, so I thought, oh, maybe,
Yeah.
So that was a situation, but it's very different for me than for you. So it was very, very different. And I think now, because of the the student loan situation, how expensive it is, students are thinking twice.
Yeah, and I think that there's enough. The cost of living is just through the roof already.
Yes.
And we're now at the point where maintenance loans aren't covering students' rents.
Yeah, it's
So
very
there's
different
now the pressure of going to university isn't just doing a degree anymore. It's doing a degree while working as many hours as you can in a part-time job. And that's a lot to cope with as an 18, 19-year-old.
Yes.
Especially if you've had no experience. Not everyone has a Saturday or a Sunday job at sixth
Yes.
form. You know, my parents encouraged me to. I'm glad they did. So I guess the question is, should someone who's thinking about going to university now go to university? What do you think?
Difficult question. I think the argument that what's the point of going to university, you won't get a job at the end of it, is a bit spurious, I think.
I think it depends
Yeah.
what you want to do.
And also, I've always believed in education for education's sake. It's a great experience, particularly to leave home and go to university.
Well, this is what I was saying to you is I didn't need a photography degree to be a photographer. There's no, having a degree may help in some instances, but it doesn't.
But you must have learnt a lot in the photography.
I did and I didn't.
You must have learnt things.
I learned
new things.
Some new things, but honestly, I didn't. The
Your
wealth
talent
of,
must have been developed through it.
I would say I developed as a person, and I put a lot into my university experience because I knew my kind of course was the more you put in, the more you got out. It wasn't like some of my friends did engineering degrees, and that was purely just you were being taught and you had to learn the stuff and you had exams, and that was it. Whereas for me, it was developing a practice, and my degree was focused quite heavily on, what as an artist, what was the practice you want to develop. And I developed a lot as a person. I went through my first proper relationship at university. There was a lot to learn from that. There was, learning to live, learning to pay rent, learning to pay bills, what that all looks like, what tax looks like. I was doing more freelance work, so I then had to learn what insurance was. So university pushed me to do all of those things, even though you don't necessarily associate those things with going to university. I didn't go to university to learn what freelance insurance was, what public liability insurance was. That we weren't taught that. But because I was in university, because I was in London, that pushed me to then go and work and push for freelance work, push for work experience. Got me a lot of experience in the music industry. And had I not gone to university in London, potentially, maybe university at all, I wouldn't have achieved those things.
So you have come out with a positive attitude.
I have, because I put that attitude in. Other people on my course, they didn't put anything in. And that's not to slam people, but that was the kind of course I was on. And I knew that's what it was like. I knew if I didn't, put as much in and make an effort with the lecturers and trying to develop as a person, because that's what my practice was, I wasn't going to get anywhere. Every piece of work I made at university, I'm really proud of. I'm proud of my failures at university, which I think is part of the university learning process.
Yes.
I think we all start off in first year with terrible grade, or not. You're not going to get first in first. Or some people will, talented people, but you learn that there's boundaries. And I'm going off on a tangent here. I wouldn't recommend university to someone unless they needed a degree for their job, but I would probably recommend a similar experience and to move away from home for a period of time, whether that's going to an apprenticeship at the other end of the country, or find a placement at a workplace for a year. I think the core skills you learn just from university as standard are really helpful, but university isn't as necessary as it used to be anymore. A degree doesn't make you stand out when you apply for jobs. People look at who you've worked with, what work you've done. I genuinely, now that is a very flatline assumption. It's not the same for every job, but I think for the majority, university doesn't have the value it had when you were at university.
Because there were fewer people then that went to university.
Well, everyone goes now, and...
Yeah. I mean, the meaning of education comes from the Latin educare, which means to lead out. Educare means to lead, like being a leader of being a general or a leader of a country. But to lead, educare means to lead out of someone. So education is about leading out of you, your talent, your abilities. It's not the way that education has become now, as in schools it's about throwing facts at people.
Yeah.
It's all about knowledge, concepts now. It's about acquiring facts, all the time acquiring facts, and that's not the real meaning of education. It's actually to lead out of someone their abilities, their strengths, their talents. It may be their talent in using those facts.
Yes, yeah.
It may be that. And so from your angle, those talents and qualities were led out of you in your course.
They
They
were.
definitely.
I think another important thing to remember is I went to university during COVID and had about half a year or a year's worth of proper university experience.
yeah.
So I probably haven't had the best experience of uni anyway because I wasn't in and it was a lot of online teaching, which I'm sure loads of people my age have experienced. I think it was a tough time and I've probably got a stained experience of university because of that. I feel like I was cheated a bit.
And people didn't go to university for that reason. They heard all these horror stories on the television about the way that universities weren't coping with it. And I can understand universities not being able to cope like the rest of the country with it, you know.
What advice would you give to people in a rut? I remember leaving university with my degree, knowing I wanted to be a photographer, but couldn't get any work, couldn't get any proper, consistent photography work. I was freelancing a bit, making a bit of money, but that basically just paid for itself. I wasn't making a profit out of that. And I was stuck in the hospitality and tourism industry for ages. It was the part-time job I had while I was at university, and then I couldn't get out of it. And I just got lucky that something came up on LinkedIn and I made a good connection, and I'm now in a very good job in photography, which I'm very grateful for. So I guess my advice would be continue to pursue what you're passionate in and make ends meet. Like I spent a year in a job I hated, and the call center wasn't actually that bad, but it wasn't what I wanted to do, and I knew that. But I think if you want to get what you want, there is going to be some suffering involved. Maybe suffering is the wrong word, but if you really want something, go and get it. But it's not going to be easy.
Absolutely. I always used to say to my students, and to students in Oxford actually, because I did do some talks there quite recently, your career is not necessarily a railway line.
It's not
It
a straight
goes
line,
straight
is
ahead.
it?
No.
Yeah.
And nowadays people hop from career to career.
Which is great.
In my day, the idea was, a career for life. You've got
Yeah.
a career for life. You've got you've got a structure. You've got your pension, which I have had with my job, my own vocation, if you like. But that's not what I was thinking of when I was engaged in it. So you may be derailed,
Yeah.
and you've got to accept the fact that you may be derailed, and try something else. But if you really have a passion for something, as you did, well, you quickly get back on track as soon as you can.
Yeah.
You don't give it up. It's testing if that passion is real. In the same way in a relationship, if things go bumpy, it's testing whether that relationship is really true, whether two people really love each other. So basically, it's testing that passion to see if it really is what you really want to do.
That's such a good point.
And the same with acting and whatever. I didn't do that. But I did spend 6 years out of teaching before I started teaching, working in offices. And they were not very happy years. But at the back of my mind, I knew the answer was quite clear. And several friends said this to me, why don't you go teaching? You'd be very good teaching. I knew I could teach.
Yeah.
But I was thinking, no, maybe I'll go and direct an opera and maybe
You were
I'll
still
do
holding
this.
on, weren't you?
I was holding on. Yeah. But more than that, I didn't have the confidence at that point to do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I went into teaching thinking if I get back into that idea of English and maybe doing a school play, maybe then I'll go back into the theatre. It'll get me started again.
Yeah.
Because I was working in offices and, if you like, starting to live at 5 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah.
And it went beyond that because actually I stayed where I was. But I had a passion for what I was doing. And the passion as if you've got a passion for what you're doing, it infects other people as well. As I did with my best students, it did.
I think that's probably the most important piece of advice is if you don't know what you want to do, just look around you. What is it you enjoy, and try and incorporate that into a job in the best way you can. So, if you're really interested in your free time, you go to the gym, then maybe a career in sports, whether that's personal training, being some sort of athlete, some sort of coach, then that's for you. If you find yourself giving lots of advice to friends and friends come to you for advice, maybe going into psychology or some sort of therapy. I think you need to look around you and at the world around you and see where you get your joy from and kind of look and go, right, well, if that's where I get my joy from, what jobs work with that? And I know it's not that easy. It's hard. And I also would say, don't worry. about what path you take. Like you said, nowadays, there's no pressure to stay in the career for life. And like I said, your degree doesn't define you anymore. You can move, and people look at experience. And if you start taking an interest in something else while you're at your job and you're with a good employer, they'll encourage that, and then you can move into a different direction.
It's interesting you say that, because a very close friend of mine in Oxford, he ended up doing law at Oxford.
Yeah.
And he was very unhappy doing law, because really he'd like to have taken an English degree. And he did some amateur theatre with us. He was in a production of Othello with me. And, he really enjoyed it. And after he left university, he went into journalism.
There you go.
And he ended up working for the BBC as a producer for Panorama. So there you go. And that's years ago. I'm very interested in opera. And I look at some singers, their biographies. There are quite a lot of major opera singers who started off doing a university degree in something totally different.
It's same with photography.
In science and things like that. They didn't start out medicine. They didn't start out with doing a degree in music. They did that later.
Exactly.
University is what you make of it, as you say. To say that to my students as well. It's what you make of it. You're walking in the dark. You can go to God knows how many open days, but until you get there, you don't know what it's like. And when you get there, you make the most of it.
Yeah.
And who knows where it will lead. You may not end up pursuing a career in a certain thing, like acting, for instance, but you could become a very good amateur actor.
Yeah, exactly.
A very good community actor. There are so many opportunities. There's one or two of my students who are doing that at the moment at Ealing at Questors Theatre, which is very good. It doesn't have to be the full deal professional.
No, you might find like the thing that keeps you going throughout the entirety of your life. That might not be your career, but it's what keeps you ticking over.
Exactly. Then you may be doing other jobs to keep the wolf from the door.
Exactly. I want to end on a point, which is, if your 16-year-old self came to you now for advice about life, where you're going to end up, what you want to do, what's the one piece of advice you'd give your 16-year-old self?
My 16-year-old self?
Yeah, if your 16-year-old self came and spoke to you.
Let go. Let go of worries, anxieties, thinking of other people, and just go for it.
Just go for it.
Just go for it. And in a way, I did. Derek Jacobi can't stand in front of a class and do a drama lesson.
No. I think being a teacher takes a hell of a lot of confidence.
But I could have been on stage beside him. I know that. But I didn't.
You've still lived a happy life, haven't you?
Exactly.
I think
and that's what you... Sometimes second best becomes first best.
Yeah. Yeah, you shouldn't put so much pressure on yourself. My advice to myself would be take a gap year before going to university.
Yeah.
Because I've kind of gone straight into my career and I've not that I'm too bothered about it, but I think having a year between where I could have just kind of done whatever I wanted, probably would have worked a part-time job, gone and travelled for a bit, come back. Maybe I would have found photography then, maybe then I would have thought differently about university. I may have still gone, but I just definitely, I think having that gap year, that thinking space before university, being that year older at university,
I wish I had.
I think could have made a big difference.
Yeah. But we did what we did, or I've done what I've done. You're still...
Who knows where I'll be? How many careers I'll have, what I'll be working in. Who knows? But right now, I'm content, I'm happy. I've achieved what I'd like to have achieved, and more already.
I think as well, from my angle, I'm still achieving. I'm writing, I'm involved in all sorts of different things. It isn't over.
No.
It isn't over.
You've got a podcast now.
I never imagined, ladies and gentlemen, in the airways, I'd be on a podcast, ever. I wouldn't have known what they were,
Well, I suppose they've only kind of come about the last few years properly, haven't
Exactly.
they? And here we are, jumping on that bandwagon.
And blogs and vlogs and podcasts, they're all rather like slimy creatures emerging from the shadows in some Tolkien-style fantasy.
Right, I think we should end the episode before you just carry on and carry on.
I've been carrying on for years.
I know.
And on that note...
You've been listening to Hello Dear, presented by Kieran and Neil. Follow us wherever you listen to podcasts for a new episode every single Wednesday. In the meantime, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok under @HelloDearPod, and you'll find bonus content and behind-the-scenes stuff there. Want to get involved further? And for Spotify listeners, you can interact with our Q&As on each episode. And for all other platforms, including Spotify, just click the link in the description of this podcast to send us a written or voice-recorded message. See you next week.